Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good topic, let's do it. Non believers, what made you believe in the paranormal? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. I used to work at a sports club that everyone told me was haunted. Various stories about footsteps on the stairs, doors slamming repeatedly, etc. All the longtime staff were too scared to be alone in the building at night. We got security cameras put in, and the manager showed me footage of orbs moving around the building. They'd be in one area for a while, visible on multiple cameras, then disappear from that area and reappear somewhere else. One time, myself and another staff member stayed late. We'd locked up the building earlier, so definitely no one else was inside, and I heard very clearly the sounds of the chairs upstairs moving, as if there were multiple people pulling themselves into a table. We both just pretended we didn't hear it and left quickly. It felt like if we had acknowledged it, it would have gotten scarier somehow. When I moved for the first time, I was 9 years old, and it was a house where a kid had died of cancer, I believe. The first day, when we were moving in, I was looking around my new room and I heard the sound of bare feet running on the hardwood. It went to the closet, and the door of it swung open and then shut. The next night I was lying in bed, and two dolls that had not previously been on the floor were lying in the center of my room. The last big thing that happened was that I was sitting in bed reading when the rug just outside of my room swung all the way down the hallway and landed in the living room, a whole distance of maybe 15 feet. After moving out, I didn't fully believe in ghosts or spirits. I thought there was a chance, but I didn't actively believe until I moved into my current residence. There's a presence in this house. It's the reason I'm stuck in my room now. My siblings claim it's bad vibes. I personally never felt any negative energy in my room, but there's unmistakably someone there. Just a few weeks ago, I was cooking dinner when a voice behind me said, "Hello." Immediately, my dogs began barking as if they heard it too. The week after that, I was standing in my room when there was a tap on my shoulder, which was very unmistakable, for it was a tap-tap that school kids do. I feel impressions next to me when I watch TV, and sometimes I can feel someone laying next to me in bed. I wish I could speak with them and let them know that I'm not scared. It seems that every day there is an attempt to talk or communicate with me, but I don't know how to. Am I crazy? Updates. I've had these helium balloons gifted to me by my manager, and although my room had no draft, they moved strangely and rhythmically bumped me in the head. I asked if someone was in the room to pull the red balloon down, and it moved down unmistakably. For 15 minutes I communicated via balloon. I can't talk with them, but I like telling the ghosts about my day or what's going on in the world, even though it's not real. It's nice to live with a friend. Oh boy, do I have a reason to believe in it? Okay, so these things I'm about to say may come off as nothing special, but I kinda shat myself, lol. So the first thing I could really explain easily was when I was around 5, I think. I remember it very clearly, which is very weird. I was sleeping, but I had a nightmare, so I woke up and started calling my mom. I heard her get out of bed and walk down the corridor until I saw her shadow in my doorframe. I was waiting for her to come to my bed, but the shadow moved an inch. I called her so many times, but she stayed there. I started looking at the shadow more closely and realized that it was too tall to be my mom, but too skinny to be my dad. I got scared and started yelling for my mom to come to me. But after a while, I lost my voice. After this, immediately, everything in my house started ringing. Phones, the doorbell, the microwave, alarms, clocks, you name it. Everything that could ring or beep started making noise. The thing that was in my doorframe started raising an arm while I was moving forward and started pointing at me. I was freaking out. I was pushing myself against the wall, trying to get away from it, but something shook me, and suddenly everything stopped ringing, and the shadow disappeared. It was my mom. She was beside me, still half asleep, shaking me and telling me I was looking blankly around me, scared as F while crying my eyes out. I did it in bed for a week, lol. For years, nothing weird happened anymore, but last year I had a few weird things happen, very small but still weird. I got into paranormal stuff, and I had a friend of mine who could read tarot, so he practiced on me, and found out that the spirit of a child was near me and wanted to tell me something. I had no idea who this kid was. Apparently, it was a little girl related to my dad. A few days after finding this out, something tugged on my shirt as I was sitting at my desk. It was the perfect height for a child to grasp on. I thought it was my little sister at first, but there was no one at home with me. It happened 2 other times, and after asking my friend about it, he couldn't get an answer. He said that a male deity was mad at me and didn't want me to know. A few hours after knowing this, I felt something like a whimper behind me. It sounded like a man. It sounded like it came directly from behind me, like the person was standing behind me. I freaked out so bad, lol. I think this is everything, and might be dumb, but still, these things happened. Oh, and yeah, the first thing could be sleep paralysis, but I was sitting on my bed and I didn't feel stuck, so yeah. My mom has no memory of this. This is what freaks me out the most. So was it a dream, or an extension of the nightmare, or real? I guess that's what you'd have to figure out. But freaky, for sure. I live in a small village near the coast, not the USA. I went to the store at 9 p.m. It was very late. I was 16 years old. I was walking to the grocery store for a Sprite, and there was this woman on the other side of the road. I smiled at her and she smiled back, but her mouth was not human and her eyes were dark. Her teeth were not human and she smiled. She was not threatening, but she kept that smile on me, and she stared and stared at me. She stopped walking. I stopped walking, and I started running. I'd never run that fast in my life. I spent about 2 hours in the store and went home with another passing person. I never saw her again, but some people have seen her, an unknown figure dressed in white, but no one mentions a smile. One thing, I'll cut straight to the chase. I walked straight into a figure standing in the frame of my bedroom door as a young boy. It completely blocked my doorway and was about the height of a grown man. The apparition, spirit, jinn, soul, whatever, in front of me was my grainy-like TV static, but the color of oatmeal with flecks of blue and red inside the static. I was taken aback because there was an effing unexplainable thing in my doorway. So I screamed and ran downstairs. However, I do not think that the projection had malice or ill intent. When I got downstairs, my younger sister told me she knew that was going to happen, and she still remembers the moment to this day. To be honest, I kind of anticipate that apparition to be some or form that I personally take on in an afterlife, or something along those lines that I will encounter in some way, shape, or form in my life again. Truly bizarre. Maybe it was a stand. There was an online friend I had who had some psychic abilities. She lived over 1,000 miles away from me. We had no mutual friends. We met on Omegle, and I didn't own a webcam at the time. One day she randomly guessed the color of the room I was in, and the shade of the color. And there was a small TV positioned on top of a shelf. She also, at one point, asked me how often I masturbated. Personal question, but relevant to the topic. As soon as the answer formed in my head, 2 to 4 times per day, she answered me as if I had said it aloud. This was a particularly noteworthy example because of how instantaneously and confidently she responded. It doesn't make sense to call it a coincidence or confirmation, but since the information she picked up was so incredibly specific and she was never wrong about it, this was a persistent ability she had, and her family had a vicarious degrees, and she had stories of it affecting her daily life, not as a flex, but simply a factor that had some practical influence on her life. A friend of mine and his wife rented a house 1 street away from my home in our mid-20s. After a few months and many house parties, the couple started telling me about signs of paranormal activity they had started to see, sounds and objects moving in the night. After about a month of the activity increasing and a few friends witnessing some of the activity, I drunkenly decided that the ghosts were clearly the past relatives of the family feuding because the man was of Cherokee descent and the woman was of Navajo descent. So we made peace treaty and had her sign one side and him sign one side, and we were drinking heavily. And the treaty was made on a 2-inch by 2-inch piece of torn cardboard from a cereal box. Also, it was Friday, the 13th of February. After the signing, I walked backwards to the room and made sure the couple wasn't followed. And I hid the treaty behind a picture on a shelf above my head adjacent to the door to enter the room. The night ended with more drinking, and I left to get home to work the next afternoon. The next night was Valentine's night, and I worked until 11 p.m. Roughly at 9 p.m. or so, I got a phone call from my friend who lived in the haunted house. On the call, my friend asked me where I hid the treaty. He had found the treaty between his pillows and the mattress after dinner, and when they were about to get their Valentine's Day love too. The family was shocked, as was I. Also, they tried to throw away the treaty twice, only for it to magically make it back into the house. Their dog finally ate the treaty. After the treaty incident, the activity really increased, and the family stopped sleeping in their room, moved everyone to the living room, and ended up breaking their lease to move out. The family wanted to go on a personal journey and a paranormal investigation show, but the landlord wouldn't sign off for the house to be on TV. Coincidentally, 5 years went by, and I saw them in a Walmart and reminisced about the crazy activity. The day we saw each other was Friday the 13th, 5 years later. I wasn't a believer, but now I know there's more going on than meets the eye. I mean, the Friday the 13th thing is an interesting coincidence. Do I think that there's one day a year there's more paranormal activity? I don't know. But if it made you believe, good for you. I remember being younger, around 5 or 6 or so, and having an imaginary friend who would talk to me when I was alone. She was called Barbara. I never saw her, but I was somehow aware of when she was going to speak, and it felt like she was of the grandma type. I don't recall specific conversations, but my sister and parents have recounted to me how it started to become evident that this wasn't my imagination, but something more. This happened when I would tell them things that Barbara would tell me. Sometimes she would tell me the door wasn't locked, and I'd go tell my parents. They've told me that one time I came down from playing in my bedroom and said that our dogs were ill and were going to vomit. The dogs did indeed vomit, and had both gotten food poisoning from bad chicken. From an adolescent age onwards is where I remember most things, and it was in my early 20s that I actually had a serious talk with my sister, and we both agreed that yes, some things we just can't explain, and provided we aren't being hurt by them, it's best to just let things take their course. I remember so many things, simple things like glasses moving on the table in front of you, the bolt on the door being slid closed, light bulbs unscrewing, sudden temperature drops to the point you can legitimately see your breath, changes in the dog's behavior, for example, all 4 of them huddled together with their heads moving in unison as if they were watching something. Even now, I experience things that I just can't ration away. Being woken up aware of someone looking at me and seeing my vision blurred, but in the shape of a person, so the only blur is the shape of a body. Then it asks in an inquisitive way, "Where's Layla?" I tell my landlord about it, and he tells me my niece Layla used to stop over frequently when he lived there. I could literally write thousands of words explaining some of the truly bizarre stuff, but to answer the original question, the early 20s are when it was 100% solidified in my mind that the paranormal is a legitimate thing that exists. I don't know how it all works, but it exists. A bunch of us atheist agnostic kids back in college decided to do a Ouija board night. We didn't dare shut off the lights or use candles. We just drew a Ouija board on paper and used a coin as a pointer. And boy, that board moved twice that night. I trusted every one of the 4 of us sitting on the Ouija round that nobody was moving it. And the spirit of the board, or whatever it's called, never uttered anything we could make sense of. Just some gibberish, after which they said goodbye. and for a few times it went to no, and that freaked us out. But it finally went away. Everyone had read about the adiodometer effect, and nobody was sitting on the board that night believed this was what was happening. We brushed it off as something weird back then, and we sat one more time to do it later on and nothing happened. It took me many years, but over the course of time I realized all the other three collectively believed I was moving the pointer because they definitely weren't, and I know I wasn't, and that's the moment I was convinced. Place I used to work. Late at night, some of us would just sleep at the warehouse. Some dudes had stories of the shadow figure holding them down when they slept. It wasn't scary or anything, and we treated it like a haunted area. We just joked about it, calling it the guy and whatnot. Well, one night me and another coworker were crashing over, BSing. I had a few. Then I started joking and talking about effing this ghost. There ain't no ghost. And all that jazz, talking shit, among other things. Fast forward to when we were asleep. I'm sleeping on a 6-foot table by the overhead door up front, and a coworker is sleeping on some tarps about 20 to 25 feet from me in the middle of the warehouse. I wake up because I feel something hit the leg of the table. I'm thinking it's a dog or something. I look under, nothing. I thought it was my dude, but I can hear his ass snoring from across the way. Then all of a sudden the table starts shaking up and down, side to side, like somebody is under the top half of a bunk bed and just disturbing the top bunk. All this while I'm on the table for a good 10 seconds or so. For a moment I thought earthquake, but I realized it wasn't. I felt several quakes before, and nothing else was shaking. Soon as the table stopped its seizure, I hopped off quickly and looked under, nothing. I grabbed my pillow and blanket sheet, it's an event rental company, and walked straight out the door and into one of our company trucks to sleep in. But before I crashed, I just had to have a cigarette. Smoking as I stared at the effing warehouse, I thought, well, F. This is an effing ghost in there. We never cussed out the guy after. Around my freshman year of high school, my buddy and I were staying at another friend's house. My two friends were upstairs playing Xbox. The door was closed. I was downstairs playing Fallout 3. It had to have been after midnight at this point. In the span of 15 minutes, three things happened. First, in my peripheral, I see a partial shadow in the kitchen that moved into the stove light. There's no breeze in the house and nothing hangs nearby. I brush it off. A few minutes later, I swear I whispered my name twice. The first time was somewhat soft, followed immediately by a louder, sharper whisper of my name. The door to my friend's room never opened or closed, and it was too clear to be through the door. I could see the door from the downstairs couch. The house was kind of an open bar layout, like that. Shortly after the whispers, the effing dishes in the sink shift, and I nope my way upstairs to my friend's room. I open the door, shut it, and ask if they were effing with me. One friend was passed out, and the other was confused. The dishes shifting definitely felt like a coincidence. The partial shadowy easily could have been my eyes playing tricks. It's the damn whispering of my name twice that I still can't convince myself it was my buddy's. That's probably the part of me that wants to believe in the paranormal.